At long last, there is light at the end of the tunnel as the Senate passes the Petroleum Industry Bill, PIB, after going through nearly 2 decades of failed attempts. Now, the bill, which was first conceived back in 2000 as recommendation by the Oil and Gas Sector Reform Implementation Committee, has suffered several setbacks following contentious issues. Well, the 9th Senate was able to resolve grey areas of the bill and has gone ahead to now pass it for third reading. And main clauses in the bill include the commercialization of Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the NNPC, and the scrapping of the Petroleum Equalization Fund and Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency. It also okayed 30% of profits accruing from oil and gas operations by the NNPC Limited for the exploration of oil in the frontier basins and allocates 3% profit from oil companies to host communities. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has also approved the bill, and once the required concurrence is achieved, the bill will be well on its way for presidential assent. Now, what will be the fate of the country's petroleum industry if this bill is eventually signed into law? And how will this affect the nation's economy and frontier basin? Nigeria Today will be focusing on these issues. I am Victor Azu. Welcome to the program. Now with me in the studio to discuss passage of the Petroleum Industry Bill by the Senate is Senator Magnus Abe. Senator Abe represents South on the board of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. He is also former chair, Senate Committee on Petroleum Downstream. A pleasure to have you join us.
Thank you very much. It's a happy day for me to be here.
I can imagine. Now, there's been so much talk about the Petroleum Industry Bill. What's so special about it?
Well, first of all, I think the history of the bill itself makes it special to Nigerians. As you stated in your intro, this was something that was started back in 2000. And part of the challenges in the industry has been that once you propose changes to the law, everybody starts to wait to see what the new law would look like before they can take decisions and make plans and all that. And this is an industry in which most of the planning is long-term because you invest a lot of money. It takes time to build the necessary infrastructure for oil exploration, and it takes time to reap the profit. So if people are not able to make long-term projections, they are not going to invest $4-5 billion into exploring any field or any sector. So a lot of the companies, since the introduction of this law, had become very reluctant to invest in Nigeria. And the uncertainty that plagued the entire country, the oil sector, over this period has now finally been laid to rest. So that is itself an achievement for all Nigerians.
All right, but given its importance, as you have alluded to it, why has it taken nearly 2 decades to get it passed? You say that makes it special, and I say, why did it take so long?
Well, you see, there's so many reasons. One of the reasons is that this law, as you know, dismantles the present structure of the NNPC and takes away a lot of the powers of the political actors over the industry. So I think that part of the challenges we have faced over time is that a lot of people who held offices before now wanted to still retain some of those advantages that they felt they enjoyed within the industry. And so they were not sincere in their determination to provide the necessary political will to enable the law to move forward. Secondly, a lot of disagreements among various stakeholders, the foreign companies, the local companies, and a lot of those affected by the overhaul of the industry, so to speak, couldn't come to terms with some of the provisions that were being advocated. So I think that finally And then there was, of course, the disconnect between the legislature and the executive, particularly in the 8th Senate and all that. So a lot of factors kept pushing the can down the road until finally the 9th National Assembly has been able to pick it up and score this goal for the country. I think we should commend the president. He is the Minister of Petroleum, and also commend the Minister of State for Petroleum for their very, very versatile input and their determination to put the interest of the country above every other interest. I think that went a long way in ensuring that we're able to get to where we have gotten to now.
All right. Now, if you ask me, I would say that you have spoken as a former chair, partly as former chair of the Senate Committee on Petroleum Downstream, and maybe partly in your current position. Let me poke the Niger Delta in you now. What are those salient provisions in the bill that can address the agitations of the Niger Delta region and ensure socio-economic development, but for the region and indeed the entire country?
Well, I don't know what is the final figure that will be agreed upon between the House of Representatives and the Senate, but I know that there is the provision there for something for the host communities. I think that will help a lot in making the host communities part of the entire process and program, because if oil is being explored in your place and then basic amenities are not provided or are not present, basic opportunities are not available to the people, you can't take away that feeling of grievance that people will get from that kind of situation. So I believe that this provision will go a long way. But I still want to say that there are still a lot of challenges facing the communities down the road. And I've heard people say that if the provision you make for the host communities are high, then the companies would not want to invest. But every company calculates profit after expenditure. So what you spend on the communities becomes part of your expenditure. And if the operating environment is peaceful and conducive, you naturally make more money because you work more days, there are no disruptions, and you lose less. So actually, at the end of the day, the companies will actually profit from taking care of the host communities.
Now that you have talked about the host communities, what out there is that Mr. President had recommended 5% from profits, which the host communities rejected. Now the Senate has passed 3%. Where do we find the balance here?
You see, there is a lot of misunderstanding of some of the intendment and provisions of this bill. When you talk about percentages, the actual figures of what people will get differs based on what you're talking about. If you talk about 3% of the operating cost of the industry, of the particular industry operating in a place, that figure will be different. If you talk about 5% of profit, that figure will also be different. If you talk about, so it depends on the context in which you are addressing the issue. But what I know is that when you talk about why I am one of those who seriously supported the idea of making it a percentage of the operating cost, is that I've come to discover that in the industry, if you are at that end waiting for profit, and the people who are managing the process don't manage it well, the profit may not come out, and you can't be sure of what that will be. But the operating cost is what happens as long as the company is operational. And so no matter how it works out, you can't lose if you're focused on the operating cost.
But what is the context in which Mr. President recommended 5%, and in what context has the Senate now passed 3%?
To be very honest with you, I have not seen the final copy of what has been passed. This just happened a few days ago.
Yesterday?
And yesterday, so it would be impossible for me to comment on specifics within a document that I'm not privy to at the moment, because I know that there have been so many amendments.
But
what I'm simply saying is that if you take one figure of one thing, or you take the other, what you will get will be different, and
certainly.
that is what the host communities are focused on.
All right. And why has it become possible now to pass the PIB? And I ask because you were a member of the Senate in the 8th Assembly. What were the problems? What challenges bedeviled it? And why has it suddenly become possible to push it through?
That's why I said the political will at the end of the day is what drives governance.
Of who now?
Of those running the country.
Because it hasn't reached the executive yet.
It will get to it's an executive bill. It actually originated from the executive.
Okay.
So it will ultimately get back there. But when we were in the Senate, I remember that the committee had to threaten the Senate leadership that we were going to introduce our own PIB if the executive failed to introduce one, and we gave a deadline. Okay. It was at that point that the PIB was introduced. So from the beginning, the determination, the commitment to pull it through to the end was simply lacking. And because every time you attempted to deal with the PIB, you take out the powers of a minister, you try to adjust these things to get the effect that Nigerians wanted. The people who were holding those positions at that time will react to that particular issue because they failed to see that the law is not about today. It's not about the position you hold currently, because now they are no longer in those positions.
Indeed.
It's about the country, the industry, and the future of both Nigeria and the industry. And I think that is a difference between the president and the current minister and those who have held that position previously. They couldn't divorce themselves from the office to the fact that if they are referring to a minister in a law, it may not be you at the end of the day. But if you look at it that they are taking away the powers of your office, then it becomes difficult for you to flow along with it. But when you look at it in the context of Nigeria, and you don't look at it in the context of you as a minister, then you understand that what is best for the country is what the legislature should do.
Now, let's talk about some of the specifics, at least, that we are becoming aware of. The bill recommends commercialization of Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the NNPC. What will be the implication of this for both the country, staff of the NNPC, and indeed the industry?
Well, I think the end result of that is that the NNPC will now be a corporate affairs registered company. It will be a CAMA company. And all the rules and laws of the companies registered under the Corporate Affairs Act would apply to the NNPC. It will no longer be a corporation of the Nigerian government. It will now be a limited liability company operating in strict accordance with the laws of the land. So a lot of the current advantages and protections that the NNPC enjoys will go. It will have to become more competitive in order to survive. It will be forced to obey all the rules of a limited liability company. Indeed. And with time, a lot of other things will change within the NNPC. But for it to remain profitable, it simply has to divorce itself from a lot of the current practices that has bedeviled the NNPC as a government corporation. And this also calls for discipline on the part of the government. Okay. Because over the years, the NNPC has been used as more or less a piggy bank for whoever is president or whoever is sitting on top of the industry at that particular time. Yes, that has influence at that time. And when the NNPC becomes a limited liability company, of course, all the rules of a limited liability company would apply to it. And it will be difficult for political actors to directly interfere into the runnings of a limited liability company. So there will be changes in the NNPC moving forward. All right.
There's definitely, we have a lot more to talk about, but let's take a breather here. And when we return, the conversation continues with Senator Magnus Abe. Please don't go away. Right, welcome back. The program is Nigeria Today, and we have been discussing passage of the PIB with Senator Magnus Abe, member board of the NNPC. Now, distinguished regulatory agents are very key in management of every business, no doubt. But what is the place of regulatory commission under the bill, which the PPPRA did not meet up with, for instance?
No, the PPPRA, as you understand from the name, is a pricing, control, balancing authority. That
But
basically,
this one now doesn't say what it's controlling, what it's regulating, rather.
no, all those agencies will be scrapped by this law.
Okay.
And what will happen is that they're now going to be, right now, the industry is regulated substantially by the DPRO, the Department of Petroleum Resources. What is going to happen now is that you're going to have the DPRO functionally divided into two regulators, one for the upstream and then one for the midstream and the downstream sector. So if you're dealing with the upstream, you deal with the upstream regulatory authority. If you're dealing with the midstream and downstream, you deal with that regulatory authority. So that would be a major change and a major shift, yes, in focus for the regulators. The other thing too that I always pointed out to people is that when you talk about host communities today, everybody automatically thinks of the Niger Delta. But I always tell people that if you look at the map of Africa 20, 30 years ago, to see who were the oil-producing countries, you will see maybe Nigeria, Algeria, Libya, that's all you will see. But today, if you look at the map, practically almost every country has become an oil-producing country. Because areas that people didn't know there was oil, or the oil were not in, with the new technologies available now, you can discover oil and it can be commercially viable in almost any area, particularly with shale technologies and all that. So when people talk of the host communities, their emphasis and their thoughts always are about the Niger Delta. Oh, these Niger Delta people want more money. But tomorrow, any part of Nigeria could be oil producing. And whatever
the same
conditions would apply to them. You know, and part of what fuels the disaffection in the Niger Delta is that the Niger Delta people don't understand why oil should be so specially treated. There are minerals in every other part of this country. They are not being exploited. And not only are they not being exploited, there are no provisions for other sections of the country to benefit from the minerals that are in those other parts of the country. But everybody is focused on oil and sees oil as a Nigerian thing, which we are not against. But let us see every Nigerian thing as a Nigerian thing, not only oil.
Interesting. Now, host communities have been expanded to include communities where oil pipelines pass through. You made an allusion, something close to it, because they also suffer environmental degradation and the likes. What's your opinion? You were close to it earlier.
No, I think that everybody who plays host to the industry is part of the industry. If you know, the whole thing about this life is that there is love in sharing, and there is, when you share, things grow. If you hold on to things, they get smaller. So to me, expanding the definition of host communities means that a lot more people will be eager to provide access, a lot more people will be eager to host infrastructure, a lot more people will be eager to give the support necessary to expand the industry and make it profitable, because any bit of it that you have can grow something for you. So I think that is the philosophy behind that, and I'm very much in support of it. Everybody should be part of it. Let's expand the cake. The bigger the cake, the better it is for everybody.
But major proponents of the bill believe that if signed into law, Nigeria should expect increase in production. How so?
Yeah, definitely there will be massive increase in investment. And increase in investment will, of course, result in increase in production and increase in profit. And I personally believe that with some of the signals that we're getting from the international community, for example, some countries now no longer allow their banks to finance crude oil exploration in any part of the world as part of their efforts to reduce greenhouse emissions across the planet. So the emphasis now is on clean energy. And between crude oil and gas, you know that gas is actually clean energy in the more acceptable form.
Indeed.
And the truth of the matter is that Nigeria is actually more of a gas country than an oil country. But because the early explorers, when they came to drill here, they concentrated solely on oil, and they did not provide any infrastructure for gas and all that. The gas was seen as a waste. And because of that, the price of gas in Nigeria is actually high because the infrastructure is not there. With this new law, I believe, and with the president's declaration of this as a decade of gas in this country,
transition.
Yes, I believe that there will be a massive transition in terms of where the investment funds will go.
Indeed.
As people will invest more in gas, and people will go directly to fields to look for gas and bring out gas, and oil will become accidental to that kind of this thing. From what is happening with the liquefied natural gas in Bonny, it is clear that if we are able to get out this gas and put it out there in the market, there are billions of dollars to be made that is just being wasted. So I believe that this law will unlock all those potentials for this country, and it will help Nigeria in no mean manner to transition to a major economic giant. But I would, at this point, add a word of caution. In this country, a lot of times, the expectations that we have when we bring in new measures and all that are not met because of what people have come to describe as the Nigerian factor, which is nothing more than Nigerians sabotaging the very effort that we have all put so much in to try to harvest. I want to call on all those who will be in charge of implementing this law to be very, very vigilant and diligent to ensure that the expectations of the people of this country are not dashed by the actions of a few bad eggs within the system.
We're running out of time, but I just thought to ask, what will be the fate of projects currently under the NDDC, for instance, when the PIB is eventually signed into law? What happens to the NDDC, for instance?
No, NDDC has its own separate act. It is not affected by this law. The provisions of the NDDC provide for the oil companies to make contributions to the NDDC. They will continue to make those contributions under that particular act. That the NDDC Act has not been in any way been affected by this new petroleum industry bill. All
right, and as a way of rounding off your thoughts, some people have argued that the indigenes or the people from the Niger Delta region have mismanaged most of the funds meant for execution of projects in the area. How will the host communities ensure that the PIB has direct bearing on them?
Well, first of all, I always take exception to that kind of line of thinking, because corruption is a Nigerian problem. It's not a Niger Delta problem. Mm-hmm. And the Nigerian money is the same, whether it's the one in Sokoto or the one in the NDDC or the one in Nimasa or the one in Northeast Development Corporation. It's Nigerian money.
Absolutely.
So if we're talking about the impact of corruption on this country, or on mismanagement on this country, we talk about that knowing that that is a Nigerian problem, and we find a Nigerian solution to it. You can't single out the Niger Delta as if that is the only place where you have problems with money in this country. That is not correct. But having said that, let me say very clearly that as far as I'm concerned, this law is unique in so many ways, because the contribution is tied to what is actually done in a particular community. That's why it's called host communities. So if Ajip is operating in Baramatu Kingdom, their own contribution will go to where their operations are. If Chevron is operating in Akwa Ibom, their own contribution will go to where. So it will actually impact those who are directly in the front line of this entire yes, and all that, and they are directly impacted by what is going on. So I think that this provision will do more for the Niger Delta than previous efforts have been able to achieve.
Senator Magnus Abe, member board of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, the NNPC, and former chair Senate Committee on Petroleum Downstream. Thank you for finding time to shed more light on the passage of PIB by the Senate.
Thank you very much.
It's much appreciated.
Congratulations to all Nigerians once again. It's a great day for our country.
Indeed. Nigeria Today is live every weekday at 7:30 in the evening. But you can also watch this and other editions of the program on www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. My name is Victor Azo. Many thanks for watching.
Advertise on NTA News 24, located at the headquarters premises of the NTA, Area 11, Lemki, Abuja. Our rates are affordable. Our reach is far and wide. We are on DSTV channel 419, StarTimes channel 101, Go TV channel 46, Free TV channel 703,